Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the latest development in efforts to revive the PC Party. The two former UCP MLAs behind the drive now working on a new partnership with the Alberta Party.
This is a way that gets us official party status faster, but without getting caught up in all the legal games that the UCP seems to be playing right now to get in our way.
Peter Guthrie says he's received a cease and desist notice from the UCP trying to prevent him from using the PC brand. As for a possible Alberta Party move, its interim leader stating, "We are exploring opportunities and partnerships that would raise the level of political discourse and refocus the conversation on improving the lives of all Albertans, not just insiders." Guthrie says he'd eventually like the party's name to change and would run to become leader. Dave, I'll start with you. What, in terms of this momentum behind a move to join the Alberta Party fold and then rebrand it, is that a marriage that makes sense?
Well, the Alberta Party, at least for the past 15 years, has really existed. I mean, it's a smaller party, but it's really existed as kind of a refuge for MLAs from the mainstream political parties that no longer find themselves having a place in the mainstream party. So if you go back to the early 2010s, you had Liberal MLA Dave Taylor left the Liberals, joined the Alberta Party. You had in the mid 2010s, you had Rick Fraser, former Progressive Conservative MLA, leave the PCs, not join the UCP, and join the Alberta Party. You had an NDP MLA, Karen McPherson, leave the NDP, join the Alberta Party. So it seems to be a kind of a place of safe refuge or for MLAs that don't necessarily want to continue with the mainstream parties. Now, the rebranding to the Progressive Conservative Party, now that's something that's really interesting, and we didn't even see that even in the late 2010s when former Edmonton Mayor and former PC Cabinet Minister Stephen Mandel joined the Alberta Party and became the Alberta Party leader. They didn't rebrand to the PC Party, which technically still existed, but they tried to become the new PC Party. And you can see over the years is that the Alberta Party and the MLAs who have crossed the Alberta Party and become part of the Alberta Party have tried to rebrand the Alberta Party as either a kind of a Liberal Party or a Progressive Conservative Party, and that looks like what they're trying to do right now. Now, what they're trying to do is get around the name change. So it's easier to start a new party, or it's easier to join a party that exists than actually start a new party where you have to collect signatures or have MLAs cross the floor. So joining a party that already exists eliminates a bunch of steps. And the question is whether the Alberta Party can, because it already exists, change its name to the Progressive Conservative Party, whether that would be allowed by the Chief Elections Officer rather than having to collect the signatures to start a brand new party called the Progressive Conservative Party.
Well, Chris, Pete Guthrie telling CTV News that the UCP has been trying to throw them off course through legal battles. What do you make of that as a reaction, a response from the governing party?
Sure, I'm pretty sure that the UCP want to minimize any bleeding of the edges from the left or the right. So I think right now they're looking at, their separatists are looking at splintering the UCP vote. And now if this is a perceived alternative Conservative Party, they also will splinter the UCP vote. So I'm sure, the UCP is going to use every legal means possible to try and stop this. In the end, I hope that Elections Alberta makes the final decisions. But forcing them to go to court will draw on their resources, and they're already challenged in terms of being able to compete financially with the UCP and the NDP.
Dave, if it is that Elections Alberta greenlights this, a name change from Alberta Party to PC Party, it reportedly could be effective as early as September. What kind of change could that bring to the political dynamic heading into the next sitting of the legislature?
Well, presumably you'd then have two Progressive Conservative MLAs sitting in the legislature. I mean, whether they decide to sit as PCs or sit as Alberta Party. I mean, I think it's, as Chris mentioned, this is a smaller party nipping at the heels of the United Conservative Party. I mean, we saw in the last provincial election in 2023, it was a very polarized election between two political parties. It was a two-party race to the extreme. I don't think any of the other parties got more than a couple percent of the vote. So, but once you introduce a third party, if it's potentially viable, that party could take a couple votes away from the UCP. It might even take a couple percentage votes away from the NDP. I mean, I think we saw in the last provincial election, there were a lot of people who, especially in Calgary, who were former progressive conservatives, who were former UCP voters, who said they were lending their vote to Rachel Notley and the NDP. The question is whether they lend their vote to Naheed Nenshi and the NDP again in the next provincial election, whether they vote for the UCP or whether they vote for a smaller conservative party that's presenting itself as less extreme on the political scale.
Interesting times ahead. Okay, next up for us, a substantial payout as the Alberta government settles lawsuits over coal mining policies.
It's really unclear. It's not transparent about how that was calculated.
Could have been spent on, health care or hiring educational assistants, improving our education system.
Some reaction there to nearly $143 million being paid directly to Atrium Coal, the first confirmed payout in a $16 billion lawsuit filed by 5 companies, all demanding damages over the province's shifting stance on coal mining. The settlement posted on Atrium's website and never publicly announced by the Alberta government. Chris, Atrium initially sought more than $3.5 billion, so should the Alberta government settling at $143 million be considered a bargain?
My answer is no. And I'll be honest, I've been involved with this issue for the last 4 years. And the challenge is, of course, the UCP politicians have been involved with coal companies for about 8 to 10 years. I'm not sure exactly what, but it's well documented. And effectively, what our legal advisors told us was, this is a government that's very motivated to not go to court. The last thing the government wanted was to have the Premier and cabinet ministers being forced to testify under oath. So these substantial payments are being made to avoid court cases, and Alberta taxpayers are paying for it.
Dave, what kind of light does this settlement shine then on the predicament the Alberta government finds itself in over flip-flopping on coal policy? What should Alberta taxpayers take away from this with further suits yet to be settled?
Well, I think Albertans should brace themselves for other payouts to come. I mean, this comes as it's a huge sticker shock for a lot of Albertans on a file that the government has over the course of the past 5 or 6 years, through various ministers of energy, various ministers of the environment, have really fumbled this file. I mean, no one besides the coal companies were asking for the Alberta government to reopen the coal policy 5 years ago. We're asking the Alberta government to allow coal mining or even open pit coal mining in the eastern slopes of the Rockies. This is something that had an issue that had tremendous opposition among Albertans across the province, but especially in Southwest Alberta, where the people who actually live there, close to where it is. And so far, I mean, the government, they've gone back, they've gone forth, they've gone back, they've gone forth, and they've tried to spin their way out of this. And now they're paying the price, and it's taxpayers who are going to have to foot the bill on this. And yeah, the government wants to keep out of the courts because they want to keep, they don't want to be held accountable for this because it looks really bad.
Chris, one more quick one on this. How much pressure do you see building now on the government to be transparent about all of these settlements, publicly disclose the amount of taxpayer dollars being paid out?
I think there will be tremendous amount of pressure. People do need to know, and on this whole file, neither the coal companies nor the government have been answering questions. We cannot get straight answers, and that's the biggest sort of frustration. The government created this issue as well and accelerated probably the amounts that have to be paid out by publicly declaring that they could owe these coal companies up to $16 billion. And the coal company executives seized on that and said, look, the government agrees with us that we have a legitimate claim. And that's a real problem that taxpayers are the ones who are going to be paying for all these mistakes and losing services. It's going to be frustrating when people have to pay for their vaccinations, when people lose services. The government says they have to cut costs despite the fact they have an $8.3 billion surplus. And somehow, we also have to pay for these, as taxpayers, pay these settlements to the coal companies for something nobody wanted.
We heard from Edmonton MP Heather McPherson off the top this evening on the state of the federal New Democrats and where she stands on a possible bid for leadership. Dave, the party and what remains of its caucus post-election, they've been doing some soul searching this summer, as we heard, spreading out to listen to members. How eye-opening do you expect that feedback to be?
Well, I hope that the MPs that are searching for feedback and that the NDP supporters and NDP members from across the country are giving brutally honest feedback, because the NDP are in a very bad place right now. They received in the election in the spring, they had their worst result in the party's history. They're now down to less than 10 members of parliament. They've lost official party status. And that goes from even 10 years ago, being the official opposition, to holding the balance of power in Parliament over the previous 3 or 4 years. So I think there's a tremendous amount of soul searching that the NDP needs to do and figure out, how they ended up in this situation, and if they want to continue as a viable political party, which they have been in the past, and they are provincially in many provinces, especially Western Canada. They got to figure out what their next steps are, and a big part of that will be choosing who their new leader is.
Chris, to what degree do you see some of that feedback we're talking about reshaping the look, the direction of the NDP, such that it comes out a different party than the one that partnered with the previous Trudeau government?
I think it's important that they really do listen to the feedback, as Dave has said. The party has to change. They've lost attractiveness, have lost relevance to the electorate, and they have to find their way back. They have to find a successful message. Somehow they've lost that, and that's a key thing for them. They need to have credibility and authenticity, and they need to strike that chord with voters.
Dave, what do you make of Heather McPherson as a prospective candidate to lead the federal NDP?
Well, I think Heather McPherson is definitely one of the strongest voices left in the NDP caucus. I mean, she's over the past number of years, she's been the foreign affairs critic for the NDP, and she's played a really big role in some of the major debates happening in Parliament. So I can definitely see that she would be a strong candidate running for leader of the NDP when they have their leadership race. I think would be fascinating. I mean, right now in Canadian politics, we're at this very interesting moment in Canadian politics. We're at this very interesting moment in Alberta politics. And at the same time, Albertans are at the center of Canadian politics like they've never been before. Mark Carney grew up in Edmonton. Pierre Poilievre, born and raised in Calgary, now coming back to Alberta to run in a by-election in a rural riding, and potentially Heather McPherson running for the leadership of the federal NDP. I mean, we could end up with the possibility of 3 party leaders in the next federal election, all coming from or having meaningful, deep connected roots to Alberta. And I think that's great for Canada, and I think that's great for our province in Alberta, especially when we're having these kind of stretched out, painful debates about separation and independence and sovereignty, or Alberta next, or whatever you want to call it. I think it's a positive thing for Alberta, and I think it'd be great to see more Albertans in the race.
Yeah, Chris, Dave makes a point. 3 party leaders, all with ties to our province. What kind of light would that shine politically on our province?
I think it would really tell Albertans, first, that Alberta is relevant within the Canadian Federation. And I think it says something across Canada when Albertans can be leaders in a positive way. Maybe not everybody is just like Danielle Smith, or how they perceive her. Great to see some alternative Albertans putting forward a different view.
Dave, Heather McPherson mentioned the race for leadership doesn't start until September, but what do you make of there not really being a timeline for how this whole thing's going to be figured out?
Well, I think that they, that they should probably go. I mean, past examples have shown that just, figuring out, you don't necessarily need to rush into it. So they have 2 or 3 years possibly until the next federal election, but you want to give yourself some time, especially with the way the situation that the federal NDP found itself in after the last federal election. They want to give themselves some time to rebuild, to think about the direction the party wants to take, but they also do need to find a new leader, and you don't want to make that race too long. So it's important, you have to give the party a little bit of time, but once you call that leadership race, you really don't want it to go out too long. And I think that they found the last time the federal NDP had a leadership race when Jagmeet Singh was chosen, I think that leadership race was something something like 8 or 9 months, or maybe even longer. It was a really long leadership race. And what we found, that what you see that happens when that happens is it drains the party fundraising, it drains the attention. It's hard for candidates to keep up momentum over that long period of time as well. So, something that maybe ends in the spring with a vote in the spring could leave the NDP in a position for the next federal election.
All right, gentlemen, we have to leave it there for time. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.